Welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Retrospective, part of the Earnestly podcast. I'm your host, Ernest EJ Christian, coming to you as we're recording this actually on a Sunday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you, of course. We are doing another watch along here, of course, joined by our, you know who he is. You don't need introduction anymore, brother. This is the man, Rob Genius, of course. Rob, what's going on, brother? I mean, it's not False Count Anywhere. We'll do that on Tuesday, Wednesday this week, actually. But we're gonna do a little throwback again here. By the way, nice shirt there, Small Joe.
Yep.
I like it. We are doing another watch along as we've been, of course, last couple months doing a little bit of a 1990 deep dive in the WWE. Of course, that is the year Ultimate Warrior became world champion. Saturday event we'll be doing here, which took place on April 28th, 1990. Although it was recorded, it was actually done April 23rd, 1990, but aired 5 days later, April 28th, 1990, in Austin, Texas, at the Frank Erwin Center. The attendance here was 8,500 in the stands. As you guys know, this is the first title defense of Ultimate Warrior since winning the title from Hulk Hogan. So I was about to turn 10 years old, literally 3 days after this event, Rob. 1990, you were probably what, 15, 16?
April 1990, I was 15.
All right, so you were still watching the product this time.
Yes.
All right. But were you still good with the product? Were you still okay with the product? Were you kind of were you burnt out the Hogan thing and you were happy Warrior was champion?
I was still good with it at this point. I didn't really. I started to. When did I start to kind of drop off? I started dropping off maybe later this year, but at this point, I was still fully invested.
Yeah.
I guess I turned into one of those people who did kind of start dropping off during the Warriors title reign. You know, we talked.
Even though you've admitted, and we watched along the Royal Rumble 90, we watched along the main event 1990, we watched along the Hogan Warrior match from WrestleMania 6, which happened weeks before this event here we're covering tonight. That you were okay with the change.
Yeah, I rooted for the Warrior at WrestleMania 6 at that point. But you know, as they got into the summer, I guess I was one of those people that when they had his first big feud, it was against Rick Rude.
Yeah,
I was one of those people that was kind of let down by that because we'd already seen it. And even though now in hindsight, you know, being I guess a quote unquote smarter fan now,
mm-hmm.
we've talked about it before. We've seen the logic as to why they did that.
Yeah.
But back then in real time, it was they just did this last year. Why are we doing this again?
Yeah.
um, and so you know they did, and then that was going on. While that was going on, they did a like another like Hogan sympathy feud with Earthquake, and you know Earthquake, you know did the whatever they called it, avalanche, whatever he called it, not I forgot what he called his finisher. Where he jumped down and sat on the guy. But you know they did that with him and Hogan. They were doing a whole Hogan sympathy thing, and that was really overshadowing the world title. And you could feel it even.
Yeah. And look,
Again, you know,
it's funny, like, because even back then, because I was watching real time, like, you like obviously I was 10 years old. I'm not smart to the actual business of wrestling. I'm just taking what is straight up. But looking back in hindsight and kind of getting back to that 10-year-old brain of mine, you can still feel that Hogan was still at the very least on level, if not still a step above Warrior in terms of the, what he was doing and what the importance of Hogan and his career being on the line versus Warrior and his title reign. Like, Warrior's title reign didn't feel as important. And the more and more he got into that title reign, it felt less and less important.
yeah, and because again, I mean, I wasn't smart to the business per se, but I had watched enough television to know that one was being treated as a bigger deal than the other,
Right.
and
Well, mm-hmm.
and that Hogan's story and all of that was being it was being treated as more important than the world title.
And the thing is, too, also what's crazy, Rob, is that we were just here literally 2 years before this with Savage.
Yeah, and the difference is they never okay. Hogan, of course, had big stuff going on while Savage was champion, but at least my perception was that they were treated maybe as equals or close to equals.
Hmm.
Like, whereas here, I mean, yeah, I mean, you could almost feel it like they felt like they made a mistake, you know,
By
and
the summertime, you can tell. I mean, the fact, and we'll cover. Obviously, going to cover this during the summer.
yeah,
So to the point that they made the main event of SummerSlam 1990 a double main event.
yeah, and exactly, and by that time, I was smart enough to everything to know that that was some transparent nonsense,
Yeah,
and that they were doing that for a reason. Um, so yeah, but this was still early enough where it didn't, you didn't quite detect that yet. But once when they started doing the thing with him and Rick Rude, then it was kind of obvious. Like, well, at that point, 'cause it felt like, why are we doing this? But then,
yeah.
and as it wore on, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, they clearly don't think, you know,
He's the
they're
guy.
yeah, they're
Yep.
putting the Hogan stuff. They're making it more important than the world champion.
Right.
That's not for no reason.
Right. And we'll dive in all that now because we're gonna
Yeah,
cover 5 matches here. Hogan, for example, will be facing Mr. Perfect with the genius in his the genius 90 cup off in his corner. You have Earthquake with Jimmy Hart in his corner against Hillbilly Jim. The Hart Foundation of Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart versus versus the Rockers of Shawn Michaels, Mario Jannetty. Of course, the Ultimate Warriors mentioned will be facing Haku with Bobby Heenan in his quarter for the world title. And then the last match of the night, the Battle of the Twin Towers, since they split up, Big Boss Man versus Akeem. So again, we're going to start this telecast right from the beginning. So again, it's going to be season 6, episode 3 of the Saturday Night's Main Event. Again, from April 28th, 1990. If you need to pause this podcast to set up, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we're ready to get started because party going. Rob, ready to go?
yep, let's do it.
All right. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And here's Warrior with the first title. And I hated this promo because for one reason, they changed the belt color. I hated belt colors. I couldn't stand the change. To me, I'm a traditionalist. I like my belts in black. Warrior was doing that show with the IC titles, which bothered me less because it was obviously a lesser title.
Yeah,
But now you taking my damn world title and making it white, then blue, then this. Like, nah,
yeah.
I get why they're doing it, but nah, leave me
Now,
alone.
now, did they sell like multicolored replica
I
belts
don't
then?
know. That's a very good question because that's the only that would be the only excuse
Yeah,
why you would do that. Obviously, in hindsight, now, looking at the business today and how the WWE does things, and it would make sense why they would do that now.
yeah.
But you know, yeah, back then, I don't know if they were doing that. I don't remember seeing different colored belts on Warrior out there. So by the way, I love this combo of Lanny Poffo and Mr. Perfect. Why the hell did they break them up? I don't understand what happened because next thing you know, within a few months of this, Perfect is now Bobby Heenan is managing Mr. Perfect. Do you know the story
Mm,
behind that, by any chance?
no, I don't, and I'm gonna go on Wikipedia here and
Let's
see
do that. Let's have fun with that one if you get a
see,
chance.
see what they have to say about Lanny Poffo
I
because
loved the Genius and Perfect together. I thought I thought that was actually not to knock on Lanny Poffo. By the way, rest in peace, Lanny Poffo, who's actually the brother of Randy Savage. Um, but I thought that was his best work actually as a genius. The dude beat Hulk Hogan on the main event last year in '89 by count out, but he beat Hogan. There's a highlight there of that match actually. Now, I
okay.
was a big fan of the genius character. I thought, looking back in hindsight, especially too, I thought he was fantastic. But I never understood why they broke him up. Now, obviously, spoiler alert, because Warrior won the title and he had both titles when he won it at WrestleMania 6. He would make the IC title vacant, which of course Perfect will win that in a tournament, I believe in May of this year, and then Bobby Heenan ended up with him. I don't know. I again, and as Rob looks for us here, I don't understand why the hell they broke him up.
There's no specific reason. It
Is
looks
there
like they just decided to switch. You
is
know,
there at least a kayfabe reason why this happened?
no, it just says that it says shortly after WrestleMania, Bobby Heenan became Mr. Perfect's manager, and Brutus Beefcake cut some of his hair at WrestleMania, and they switched him off to feuding with Beefcake, Poffo,
Yeah, but
and
this is after WrestleMania though too. Also, they're still together.
yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
So it looks like no, that there was no kayfabe reason given. They didn't have any type of split or anything.
You know what?
It
If
just
the next time I see a Ask Bruce Anything episode available on something wrestle, I'm gonna ask that question to Bruce Pritchard. Why did you guys break up the perfect genius combo? That's a great question. By the way, this is not a green screen. This is actually done with the horses in the arena, right? Yeah,
looks like it.
yeah. This is also be one of Jesse Ventura's last appearances with the company. He has
Yeah.
one more main event. He has one more main event to go in July, and then he's gone for good with his dispute with Vince here. But of course, this is the end of era for me because I love Jesse Ventura.
Oh, me too. Yeah, we've talked about that before.
Oh, we all the time, all
Yeah.
the time. All right, there's Sean Mooney with a perfect and look at genius. Ooh, he played that little like weird, some would say gay character. Genius did. He played it up a little bit.
Yeah, because back then, if you had any, well, if you had any type of mannerisms like that, that was associated with, you know, being gay,
Right.
and
See, watch him. His all the he was great at it too. I don't think it was gay either. That's the funny thing.
oh no, I don't. It's just like back then. I mean, back then in particular, if if you had a certain demeanor or you had certain mannerisms about you, that's what people said, and you know, and obviously it's homophobic,
Yeah, of
then
course.
and now,
Yeah.
but that's well, for those of any younger people listening, that type of stuff was talked about a lot
This is
back then,
1990, bro. I mean,
a
back
lot
then,
different.
I'll be honest with you. Back then, especially being called this gay was an insult. It was a negative.
Yeah,
That's
and
the world we lived in back in 1990.
it was homophobia was it wasn't just accepted behavior; it was encouraged behavior.
It's encouraged, absolutely.
Um, so that's that's
Thank God we live. I mean, look, all the issues have been in 2025. We're in a better place now than we were in 1990 in terms of that some of the stuff.
yeah.
Damn sure. At least now you get more pushback. So yeah, perfect here. He's gonna get pushed, of course. Again, we discussed this before too, you and I, on previous episodes of the show. There were talk months before this that they were going to push WrestleMania 6 to be perfect in Hogan.
And
Obviously, we know why they didn't do it. We get it.
yeah, but now, I mean, in hindsight, you could even this right here. I mean, because Perfect was higher up on the heel food chain or totem pole than
Mm-hmm.
Haku. So, I mean, you could even look at this now and see that they're giving Hogan the match against the bigger heel than the world champion.
Yep. Yeah, I would say, yeah, no, to your point there, I would say at this point, Perfect is the biggest heel in the company because Andre's on the way out at this point. Andre just did his last match at WrestleMania 6. Who you would say is a big heel? I mean, DiBiase, as big as he was kind of in a little bit of like a there's a
I think
little
it
lost
was.
there. DiBiase was still pretty bad, but he was not red hot like he was 2 years prior. I mean, who else? What other heels you have out there? I mean, Savage, I guess, will be the only one you can consider.
It's just now, I guess, but he for the last 6 months he'd been beaten like a drum.
Yeah, I mean, him and Dusty was in a big feud here, but even though Savage was a heel, Savage was still he was the heel that was too cool for school too. Also, though, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and like I think at this point, like some of the shine was off because he'd lost so much. He was been beaten up and down all over the place for the last
Right.
6 months. So it probably was perfect.
Perfect.
I'm sorry.
He was red hot too because remember he was red hot because he just got to the company late 88, 89. He had some fantastic matches. Him and Hogan were already feuding in late 89, and then of course he becomes IC champion this year. So Perfect actually ended up being really I would argue right here freeze frame this Main event right now, Perfect is the biggest heel in the company. Now I
And
think I'll change when Earthquake does the
yeah,
shit to Hogan a week later. But
and this was kind of like a blow off match because they Hogan and Perfect had been wrestling at house shows
yeah,
because that's what he was defending against going into WrestleMania. It's just
right.
it was a
He had
house
the match.
show. It
Mhm.
wasn't televised.
Right. I mean, and quite a lot. The whole Warrior thing too. Also, like the main event in January of '89, of '90 rather, him and Warrior tagged up against Genius and Perfect. So him this feud's been going on for at least 4 months now.
Yeah,
So this was the blow off. You're right.
and because now again for any younger people listening, back in the day, they had house show feuds, and you might have gotten a segment on TV, maybe, but they had a lot of feuds that just happened on house shows.
House shows mattered more because that's where the better butter money was made in house shows.
Yeah.
It makes sense now. It's funny. Like I look at back. I used to complain a lot about that because, like, not understanding that logic. Why was this match? Why wasn't this match on SummerSlam instead of a house show? Why was this match not done this way? And the reason why is they left the feud blowout. They let the feuds to be blown up on the house shows as opposed to be on the big events. I understand now in hindsight. Like for example, SummerSlam '88, there were a lot of matches there that made no sense. That they just threw
Yeah.
together. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, why would you have to blow off on the bigger show? But because, for example, they blow off for Rude and Roberts, Jake and Rick Rude was not
Yeah.
done at SummerSlam. Was done on the house show, and
Yeah.
then on the main event.
Yeah.
So, but again, different business model from what we have now.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, well, I hope one day that well, obviously the house show thing will never be like it was in terms of its importance or in
oh no,
storylines and all.
and they've told you that already too. Also,
Yeah, but I mean, I hope that at some point they do at least start having more of them again.
I don't know if we can go back to that without them relinquishing TV appearances because they're so TV based now. Everything is so about
Yeah.
showing the face. I don't think you can go back to that because you can't go back to that without allowing and another thing too also too I don't know if these guys want to continue the work. These guys are working less now in comparison to what these guys are doing in the 80s and 90s. Like they're working
Yeah.
less now.
Well, I think to a certain degree that's to their detriment though, because this was, you get fewer chances to work against people now.
I agree.
And now look, we won't know the effects for maybe another couple of years, but we're because right now, I mean, the people who are still in prominent positions are people who came up doing house shows and who came up working against each other all the time. But in another few years, maybe year or two from now, or 2 or 3 years from now,
Hmm.
we're going to see there'll be more people who did not do that, and there will be, I think there will be an effect on the ring work just from people not being familiar with each other.
That's very true. By the
Um,
way, you talking about I got it oversold. Perfect oversold. Kurt Hennig like oversold.
yeah, now here I think he's not overdoing it here. I think he's doing the right amount here. But
No, he is. He is. He is. He is.
yeah, but I mean, there were times where there were times where he overdid it, and like there were just too many flips out of things, and
What would you rank Perfect among the greatest IC champions? He's not there
good,
yet, though. He'll eventually become that guy in a month later. But
good question.
I remember there was a time people thought he was the greatest IC champion of all time.
Because I mean, because when I first started, there was Tito Santana doesn't get anywhere near enough credit. He,
I agree. I agree with that.
because I mean, he was a two-time champion, and at one point he was arguably like the number two babyface in the whole company to Hogan.
Hmm.
Um, and he had a lot of great IC title feuds with Don Morocco, with Greg Valentine, um, even with Savage before up until Savage beat him for the title, and even afterwards, because they had a bunch of rematches.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you can't you got to give Tito his credit. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. Um, if you do, I'm gonna do like a top 5 just out of people I watched. Um, he might be top 5 because
Yeah,
he had it for a few months here, then he won it back, and then he held it up until the following year when he lost to Brett. Um,
the SummerSlam night in
yeah,
'91, great match by the way. And Perfect was hurt in that match too. He had a bad
yeah,
back.
yeah. His like Brett talked about it, like his back, Perfect's back was like completely just shot, and but he still went through. He went through the match, and Brett's always giving him the utmost amount of credit for that.
Mm-hmm. I think Duke from Duke Loves Wrestling, our good friend and comrade, we did a podcast actually about a year or so ago, and we ranked our top 10 IC top champions. And I think I had Perfect in my top 10, obviously, but I can't remember I had him exactly. And obviously looking back, obviously there was a period where I did not watch for a while, and obviously since then, the Miz has done a lot of great work as that belt's as that belt holder, and people put him a lot in the top one or two greatest, But I know Duke had Honky Tonk Man #1, and certainly I would argue that is the greatest singular title reign of that belt. I definitely will say that. Um, I would probably put Perfect top 5. I mean, I look at the Miz, Honky, obviously. I still say Warrior's my #1, but I've explained to you why I've always said Warrior #1 for me, because he's the only guy that made that belt feel equal to the world title. At least when I was living through that era. Um, but yeah, Perfect's #5 is in the top 5 definitely.
Well, I think I definitely have him top 10. Because
Oh,
for
I
me,
said top 10 is definitely yeah.
okay. I mean, if I had to just without putting them in any order, um, Tito, Savage, Honky Tonk Man, um, yeah, I'd put Perfect in the top 10. Um, Sean,
What
Miz,
what about Brett?
um, it's top 10 probably, yeah. Yeah, I'd put it top 10. Um, Gunther, so that's 8 that I have right there.
Yeah, that's 8 right there.
Um,
What about Razor?
did he how long like, when he won it, how long did he
He won it 4 times though.
okay.
I think.
Okay, well then and then he won it in one of, like, he was involved in a couple of the biggest matches ever,
Yeah,
those
ladder
ladder
matches.
matches. So,
Yeah, both ladder matches.
so yeah, that's 9. Let me see, I would need one more. I don't know who
Oh, perfect flex.
maybe Chris Jericho? He would
Hmm.
be that one.
I
Um,
remember as a kid, I used to pop every time Perfect did this move. I was always pop perfect flex. Could you have seen Perfect as a world champion?
um,
Probably not in this era because of the way they were booked.
yeah, I mean, if he was if, like, during Attitude Era, definitely, any subsequent era, yes. Just not this era because, again, the way the title was booked and the way the world champions were booked, no. But definitely, like, yeah, during, you know, subsequent eras, yeah, and he was one of the last, I would say, like, really credible AWA world champions.
Hmm. By the
'Cause
way, oh,
the
go
kind
ahead.
of the blueprint was, well, like, the first kind of seeds of what he would be in the WWF as a heel were kind of
Hmm.
planted in that AWA world title reign.
By the way, Perfect was undefeated going into this year. This is not his first loss.
Yeah.
This is his second loss. He's now on a losing streak. His first loss was actually at WrestleMania 6 against who? Brutus the fucking
Yeah.
Barber Beefcake. For the record, people shit on that all the time, and I get why they shit on that. But I understand why they did it. It makes sense when you consider what plans they have for Brutus at the time. Brutus was
Yeah.
supposed to be the guy to get the IC title later this year, and then the accident happened with his the boating accident happened in July of that year. Um, but people shit on that because how the fuck is Perfect losing his first match to not Hulk Hogan, who's been feuding for like at this point 4 months, not Warrior, but to Brutus Beefcake. The reason why is that Brutus Beefcake was being set as the next IC champion. That was the plan. So technically, it's understandable why they decided to book it the way they did. I'm not mad about that actually. Like unlike everybody else is.
Yeah, and then also another kind of foreshadowing here. Usually on Saturday night's main event, when they did it back at 11:30 at night,
Yep.
the main event was the first match.
Usually. It was definitely one of the first 2 or 3. Yes. It was definitely one of the first 2 or 3.
Usually, it was like the biggest match, the most important match went on first. And so they're leading off
sometimes, yeah. Is that Martel? That's what Martel.
Yeah.
This is during his model years. Yeah, it wasn't a mass match. It was definitely either the first, second, or third match at most. Because they peaked it at the middle of the telecast. It was a 90-minute show, so the latest you get the best match will be like 12 o'clock. Oh, there's John Tenta.
Yeah.
Also known as Earthquake and Jimmy Hart. This dude went to the moon immediately when he got into the company. So, like, when you rank, obviously they're not feuding yet. The feud with him and Hogan would come up a week later. But I've always said that probably Hogan's best non-title feud of his entire career might be this one, Earthquake. This one and Boss Man are a split for me. But I would argue this one is definitely conversation. I think this is more of an emotional investment in this one because of the way they wrote the Hogan story that with this feud with Tenta with Earthquake. And again, Jimmy Hart with teaming up with Hulk Hogan years later will never make sense to me.
No, and it just
even today.
You explained. I mean, because at WrestleMania 9, they were together, right? And
was there a kayfabe reason for that, by the way?
I don't think so, because Jimmy was gone after, I think he was gone after like the Nasty Boys lost, I think. Nasty Boys lost the tag team titles to the Legion of Doom. I don't remember him being around much after that.
Right.
And then actually, let's go back to Wikipedia and see what they have to say about that. Because
they said that they had a friendship and done during their days at Memphis.
Well, yeah, so
which is fine, but I want to see where the hell. Go ahead.
They were always like real life friends, but in terms of kayfabe, there's no such thing. And
this is by the way, Hillbilly Jim here. This here was the first time I saw him on TV at this point, probably in about 2 or 3 years.
Oh, he barely wrestled. Because he was pretty active in like 85 and 86. And then after that, he barely showed up at all. Okay, so it says here that he managed the Mountie.
Right.
And then
but never understood the Jimmy Hart Hulk Hogan thing on screen from 1990. Never understood that.
Okay, and it says, all right, late 1992, Money Inc. regained the tag team titles from natural disasters, and that led to the Nasty Boys turning on their manager. So Jimmy was still with the Nasty Boys up into 92.
Okay.
And
yeah, for me, it's some blind spots in 92 because I was kind of in and out at that point in 92.
Okay, so Hart broke with Money Inc. early in 93 and turned face when the team attacked Brutus. Oh, so there it is. Okay. Mm-hmm. They attacked Brutus. Money Inc. attacked Brutus Beefcake. Jimmy turned face. And then, okay, so that's why he was with Hogan and Beefcake at WrestleMania against Money Inc. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so now there it is.
That makes sense.
So there. Okay, so there actually was a kayfabe explanation. How about that?
Okay.
It's just we weren't watching then, so we didn't see it.
Yeah. I was in and out at that point at 92. Like
I was,
92
yeah,
by this time, I did watch a little bit of WrestleMania 8. Um but I was at this point I was in and out. Like I was following what was going on to some degree, but I was not heavily invested, especially because Hogan wasn't involved at this point. Hogan was not around this time. This is when Hogan took
yeah.
his little hiatus. You know, if Hogan
Because
wasn't there, I didn't give a shit.
I mean, because I think I started to really check out in '91, and then by '92, I was just occasionally again checking in to see what was going on. By '93, I was all the way out. You
Yeah, I'm
know,
the same way too. 91 was only out. Like to me, so for me, the last thing I remember watching in 91 was the main event after Hogan won the title from Slaughter. And I watched that first main event. Um, and then after that, after April of 91, I was pretty much out. And
well,
I
for
was in
me,
and out. So I was in and out. I will check in. That's the squash match pretty much here.
yeah. So for me,
Um,
I think all right. When did I start? Okay. I was in pretty much through 1990, and then up until I started to drop off first half of '91.
mhm.
And for me, okay, yeah, I started being in and out through '91, and then because we haven't met, well, I gave up on WCW first because like when Rick left WCW,
Right.
they pretty much like for a few months they went completely in the toilet, and it really looked like they may not make it at that point. So
Mhm.
a lot of people gave up on WCW, and then I kind of stayed in with WWE until WrestleMania 8, and then after that, I was pretty much done.
I forgot Earthquake destroyed Hillbilly here after the match.
Oh, oh yeah, I don't didn't remember this either. And
But this is all giving Earthquake a platform to set up for him and Hogan.
yeah,
You
and
show how important he is.
see, and they had to do this because well, they had to go kind of the extra mile because they'd already because this was similar to what King Kong Bundy had been doing a few years
Right.
before, but
Correct.
they
This
had
is
to
correct.
take it up a notch with doing like the stretchers and everything.
Yeah.
Mm,
It sets up the Hogan thing.
yeah,
All right. Next match here. Hogan. So Hogan's gone. Earthquake's gone. All right. So now you have Rick Martel. They put up this. Now he was ready to model at this point too. Also before this. So I don't understand why these vignettes. Oh, fragrance. That's why.
yeah,
Arrogance. The fragrance. That's why. These vignettes are pretty cool actually. Now this is a guy that could have been a world champion in any other era. Also,
yeah. Well, and
character
he was
character was
also a former AWA World Champion.
that's right. Um, he was with Slick for a while, and then I think him and Slick split up around this point. I believe. No explanation there. No explanation why him and Slick split up. All right, this is Heart Foundation. These guys at this point have not been tag champs for about 3 years now. But as you know, they'll get the titles back by
Yeah,
SummerSlam this year. One of the greatest matches ever. Um, that year anyway. That match with them and Demolition was an amazing match actually. 2 out of 3 falls. Hmm. Jim Neidhart. But a lot of people shit on Jim Neidhart. I don't get why. The guy he was a great character. He was okay in the ring. A lot of people
yeah.
shit on him for. I don't understand that.
Um, because like he wasn't Brett, and Brett
Yeah, but
was so good.
that's the point though. You want the same guy.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's
Kind of fascinating here. They're doing a face versus face match here.
because who are they taking on? Oh,
Rockers. They're both baby faces here. So the foundation.
because they it's like they had a they had a bunch of matches on house shows around
Yeah.
the country.
But again, this is kind of like what they didn't do in this era much. Hogan and Warrior was the first time. Maybe Vince felt comfortable after doing the Hogan Warrior thing weeks before this. But
Maybe so, and also I think, um, I don't know. Like, I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess at this point, like they didn't have a lot of. I mean, they didn't have as many tag teams at this point either. Like, they had both of them. They had Demolition, um, and I think the only other one they really had was like the Orient Express, I think.
hmm
So they just didn't have a bunch of teams, and so yeah, I mean, because I mean the tag team division, well, I mean that's what happened, but
I mean, here at this time,
it was almost, yeah, it was almost wiped out.
well,
Which is,
you have Demolition, obviously the championship at the point now. Rockers, Hot Foundation, Orient Express. Um, the Nasty Boys weren't there yet. Uh,
they weren't there.
Power and Glory ended up becoming a thing around this time.
They weren't together yet, though.
Yeah, they came back like I think 2 months later. Um,
The Legion of Doom wouldn't get there for another couple months,
they split. They split Andre and Haku because Andre's health was shit.
and they'd split the
Um,
Powers of Pain. They'd split them up.
yeah, which I still
So,
think was shitty, but whatever.
well, because neither one of them was, much of it.
And most of the tag teams there were at this point bay faces.
Well, they were gone. I mean, because the Killer Bees weren't there anymore.
Nope.
The Rougeos weren't there anymore.
Yeah, what happened to Rougeos here? Why did they go away?
I think
Contract
I don't
shit.
know. They just got released or what? Um, because it's funny because the tag team division basically, within like within just like a few months, it just completely got wiped out. Because
Which is crazy because we always brag that 1989's roster is among the most talented in history of the company, and then
yeah,
1990 everybody's fucking gone. Like it's making sense.
well, because remember the Brainbusters were there in '89, and they got, for different
hmm
reasons, they both left, got released, and then the Rougeos were finished, and I think they were gone by now.
Yeah,
And the Killer Bees were gone, and the Powers of Pain split up, and Haku and Andre had split up, and um, the Bolsheviks, they were a jobber team anyway for the most part, but I think they split up like after WrestleMania, after because they got squashed by the Hart Foundation. Um, they just, yeah, it, and honestly, I mean that happens. Tag team divisions tend to go that way. I mean, one minute they're very robust, and then like they will literally get decimated within just a few months or 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's happened repeatedly throughout history.
all right. I'm checking right now exactly. Okay, 1990. So here are your tag teams 1990. So you had the Bolsheviks in 1990 still existing, the Bushwhackers, Colossal Collection, which split up by April, Demolition, but they ended up getting hurt. X ended up getting hurt in the middle of this year. The Genius, technically they counted the Perfect and the Genius as a tag team. You had the Heenan family as a whole. The Nasty Boys end up coming there later in the year. Orient Express coming later in the year. Well, no, no, Orient Express was a thing now. Sorry.
Yeah,
Power and Glory came later in the year. Powers of Pain, they split up pretty much around this time.
yeah,
Rhythm and Blues, yeah, Rhythm and Blues, and then later on the war, yeah, the tag team division here was shit. Not shit. This not there wasn't much teams here. A lot of teams in '89 that existed were gone.
yeah. Because if we go
Right.
back to like the all right, Survivor Series '89,
Right.
because that's when they had, that was the last time I think they did like, or one of the last times during this era where they did the
Try to survive.
yeah, actually '88 was the last time they did like the 10 tag team match. So
Yeah.
we just go back to then. All right, all right. Because the Killer Bees had already split up, but just the teams that were in that Survivor Series match, Powers of Pain had split up.
hmm
All right, the Rockers are here. The British Bulldogs were gone. Remember, they'd been a big deal up until like through '88, and they were gone by now. So you have the Hart Foundation here. The Young Stallions was Paul Roman and Jim Powers. They'd split up by now. The Brainbusters were gone. Bolsheviks were about to split up. the Rougeos were gone. Yeah, so many of the teams were gone by this point. They'd been split up or they were just gone altogether. So that these were like really, I think at this point you had these two, you had Demolition, um, you had the Orient Express,
Mm-hmm.
and then Rhythm and Blues they were together at this point. So that's five, and then um, the Bolsheviks were about to split up, so you had maybe like six, and then but the Bushwhackers weren't really active by this point. They were barely active after like '89, I think.
By the way, little fun fact here. So we watched the first match between Perfect and Hogan, right? Um, we had discussed the IC championship being vacant at this point. About this Demolition here. They were now Demolition at this point is still baby faces here,
Yeah,
but they're gonna turn heel at some point in the next couple months.
yeah.
Um, Perfect actually won the IC championship the same day this was filmed.
Oh yeah, because that's another thing. Younger people watching or listening to us now. Um, everything was taped except for the pay-per-views. Everything was taped, and
You got three baby faces right there. Three baby faces.
yeah, and so and now we're talking about the match order before. So this is the third match,
Yeah,
and still no world title match.
but you don't think that they were out on Warrior 28 days into the freaking reign, right? 28 days into
Um,
it? That's way too early.
that'd be a bit. Yeah, I doubt.
He hasn't been champion a month yet.
I doubt. Okay, I won't say that, but I mean,
I mean, maybe Vince had some like, okay, let's make sure we got I's dotted. Because Hogan's going to wait too also, uh, for a while,
yeah. So okay,
for a couple
I
months.
won't say that. I won't say that they made up their mind already by this point, but
They probably saw some signs.
mm, this is pretty. It's pretty telling that they. I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't know. It's just. I mean, this might be hindsight being 2020,
Mm.
but that they would wait that late in the show, and look, maybe it was just, and maybe it was a mistake or whatever. Maybe there wasn't anything to it at this point, but I mean, hindsight, it does look a little weird that they would wait this long to air the world title match.
By the way, best website ever to get all this information, SmackDownHotel.com.
Oh yeah, yeah, I go there for a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they give you a nice heel face breakdown. So, for example, in '89, here I'll tell you a second. Um, in '89, all the heels, or '90 rather, not '99. I'm apologize for that. So Demolition was considered a heel at this point, although they were a babyface for a little while too, though. I don't know how that works. They consider so they had four tweeners in 1990. When you hear the tweeners, the tweeners were Bad News Brown,
Really?
yeah, Barry Horowitz, Louis Piccoli, and Spider Number Two, which I think is Dean Malenko. No, no, never mind. That's a Dean Malenko. So it says here, tweeners.
Okay. No, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, this is crazy, dude. S.C. Jones was still in the roster in 1990. That's crazy.
They had guys. Yeah, I mean, there were guys. Because back in the day, there were guys who would just they would stay on a long time as jobbers for.
Yep.
It was funny because guys like SD Jones, you know, at one point he was actually like a legit mid card kind of guy,
Mm-hmm.
but we only know him as a jobber. Iron Mike Sharp was like a at one point was more of like a solid kind of mid card heel, like back in the '70s. But we only saw him as a jobber.
And there's the Rockers and Demolition now. Demolition's playing both sides of here and trying to help him out and put him in the ring, but
Yeah.
and now they're fighting now.
Oh, now we got a
Now they
double
got a double
disqualification.
disqualification. Yep. What a mess.
Yeah. No, they didn't do triple threat matches back then, but this would have been a hell of a triple threat
Oh
tag.
hell yeah! I'm in for this one. This actually would be a modern day like you know Hardy's,
Oh yeah, Edge and Christian
Edge
and
of Christian, the Dudleys. Like Demolition would be the Dudleys, obviously.
yeah.
The Hardys probably the Rockers. Edge of Christian probably be would be obviously the Hearts. Who would have thought the guy, the blonde guy, and Bret Hart would be two top 10 guys all time,
Yeah,
and Mr. WrestleMania right there in blonde. Who would have
and
thought that? Shawn
I'll put
Michaels.
it this way because they had tried the singles run with Brett before, but look, I'm telling you right now, nobody called this for Shawn at this point.
Fuck no.
At this point, Shawn and Marty were the same guy except they had different hair color.
Yeah.
I mean, so like nobody saw the vision here except for Vince at this point.
Yep. And again, it's more Earthquake here. They're pushing Earthquake.
Yeah.
Setting up for Hogan. Oh, Mets are down 6-2. Damn it. Yeah, this is definitely Hogan's best non-title feud. My favorite is Bossman though. Oh, so they did tease Hogan here. See, look, this happened in March prior to the main event,
Oh,
the
okay.
WrestleMania 6 match.
Well, this wasn't the one where he was like taken out. Like,
No. That was on the Bro Love show. I remember that being a big deal. I remember, and we'll cover that with the summer when we get to July. It being a big deal as a kid. Crying when he got hurt. I think it was a real thing. Oh my God,
oh,
Hogan got hurt. He's
'cause,
gone
yeah,
forever.
I'd already seen it with King Kong Bundy
Yeah,
because it was very similar. Um, except like, well, the different, they did kind of up the ante here because with Bundy, he was injured, he has his ribs taped and all of that, and
yeah,
it was just a matter of would he be okay to work WrestleMania. Here, they made it out like his career was over.
yeah.
Because I mean, you had to escalate it. Because people like me who had been, in '86, I saw all the King Kong Bundy stuff. So for people like me who were still around, like I had to escalate it, or else it would have just been, it would look like just the same thing, you know.
You're wiser to business point now in 1990.
Um, a little bit. I mean, again, just well, I'd watched enough television to be able to just, and I'm course me, Mr. Math guy, I could just pattern recognition and you know yeah, I could recognize very easily if you were doing something similar to something you had done a couple of years ago or whatever. But to that end, I mean, it was still very well done, like, and it was good for them that they saw that they knew they had to escalate it because you know, again, if you had seen the King Kong Bundy stuff, then you would have known it was a similar type of thing. So they knew they had to escalate it.
Yeah, and go figure too. The bunny thing happened on main event as well too, and I think on the March
Yeah.
edition of the main event '86.
Now, when the Bundy stuff happened, even though I knew that wrestling was quote unquote fake, I mean, I was still they still hooked me enough to believe that Hogan was a Jeopardy back in
Mm-hmm.
'96 when they did the Bundy stuff.
Showing the WrestleMania 6 highlights here, courtesy of the Coliseum Home Video.
Yeah,
Big ass crowd there, man. Look at that, Toronto. They really put look. They look. Warrior got every run manageable. Got the Hogan dust. He got the dust in the crowd, and he was ready. He was already over anyway. Him
yeah,
getting him over wasn't the issue. It was actually making him whether or not he can. I think the bigger issue for Warrior was more so, okay, can you make this guy the head of your company and market him outside of the bubble of wrestling?
yeah, and
Like,
that was always the thing. Like he was a big wrestling star, right? That's the biggest thing. He was a wrestling. He was a huge wrestling star,
Hmm.
whereas Hogan was a mainstream, mainstream entertainment figure.
There's Bobby and Haku. Now he's Jacob Fatu. That's his father, right? Jacob Fatu, right?
How cool? No, he's no Tamatonga.
Tonga. Okay, okay,
He's their dad.
okay.
Um, I'm not sure. Wait, who was Jacob's dad?
That's a good question.
Because oh, so okay, so Jacob's dad is Samu of the Samoan SWAT team, Rikishi's partner.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, because Samoan SWAT team was Samu and Fatu was Rikishi, and so Samu was Jacob's dad.
I was always a Haku fan.
Oh yeah, yeah, Haku was all yeah.
There's a warrior. See, that's the thing. All these little things he's doing here don't look as appealing when you're the main guy. When you're a mid carder, the top of the mid carder, it's one thing. But when you're the main guy, all that stuff doesn't look as appealing outside the bubble of wrestling.
Yeah,
But I also think, and I don't want to sound like I'm defending him here. I do think there was also a just a downturn in business in general anyway. That I don't think Warriors get all the blame for that though.
no, no, because no, exactly, and then I mean, just like I mean, with Brett and Sean, right? That wasn't really, they get Brett, Sean, and Diesel get kind of tagged with they were champs during a down period,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't. They didn't cause the down period. It's. I mean, it was basically because Hogan wasn't there anymore, and none of those guys were him.
And again, this is why Hogan's on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I mean that's just that's all.
It's just that simple, brother.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, Hulk Hogan was Hulk, and Warrior wasn't Hulk Hogan, and Brett and Diesel and Shawn, they were not Hulk Hogan, and it's just, you know, that's
He loves talking to his tassels, to his hands, and his arms.
yeah. And see, like, like you said, like when you're like the Intercontinental Champion, like this is fine, but now it's like, now, you know, this is just weird, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
Yeah, you go on Kathy Lee and Regis Kathy Lee. It doesn't look as appealing.
yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I see this. Yeah, this doesn't play. If or back then, well, Arsenio Hall,
Arsenio
like,
Hall, you get rid of Arsenio Hall. Arsenio Hall can make that work, but the other shows,
yeah, you couldn't
they're
you
laughing at
couldn't
you.
go where you just Kathy Lee and carry, or the Tonight Show and carry on like this.
Right. If you didn't give Warrior, let's do a little fancy booking here. If you didn't give Warrior the belt here, and Hogan goes away, who would be a good candidate for world champion 1990 WWE in your opinion?
Um,
Because there are some options.
okay, I think if they just okay, um, man, it's weird because I think they had to do it at that point.
They had to.
They had at that moment they had to do the title change because otherwise, I mean, even with Hogan still on top, it would have deflated after that, I think. But if they didn't do it with him, I think you would have had to do it with a heel. Maybe Perfect, maybe DiBiase.
You
I
can go
think
back
it
to
would be one of those two
You
guys.
go back to Savage. You wanted to,
Yeah, but then they would have had to rehab him because he'd gotten beaten so many. Hogan had beaten him so many times, and
but they actually did end up rehabbing him by the end of this year. Though I think once after they got away from Dusty, when him and Warrior started feuding. Remember when Savage started chasing Warrior for the title, and
yeah,
Warrior told him no,
yeah,
and then that to me was him being rehabbed because I think what happened there he reprioritized his what he wanted to do. Because after he lost to Hogan, the title wasn't a priority anymore for him. He was the king.
Yeah.
Once Warrior got the title again, and when after him and Dusty got done with their feud, um, Savage started reprioritizing the title again. I think Savage could have been a viable option. But it depends on how you book it. You had to rehab them beforehand though. The timing would have been off. It would have been later in the year.
Yeah. And so
The thing, here's the bottom line. Warrior was the right guy at the time to do it.
yeah, he absolutely was. There was they because at that point they had to, they at that moment you had to do a title change. Yeah, I mean, because you had to have Hogan lose to somebody at that point,
Yeah,
and then just because they were just were at that point in kind of the business and the cycle of things. And at that point, like yeah, Warrior was because he had already beaten everybody else.
yeah. And
Um,
he was the most over guy in the company, even more than Hogan at this point.
so yeah, I mean, because I mean, he'd already beaten DiBiase a bunch of times. He'd already beaten Savage a million times. Um, Now he and Rick Rude didn't. I think um, they never feuded. Well, I think because there's a video out there of like
Who's that?
of Hogan and Rude. There's like a house show, and
From
Rude
from from January '88 from Boston Garden. I remember that one.
and then Rude just clobbered him the wrong way with a chair. And
Bad decision by
so
Hogan.
yeah, so some people. I mean, not I have no idea if this is true or not, but some people have put two and two together and figured and decided that after that incident, Hogan didn't want any parts of dealing with him. But again, we have no idea. That's never been spoken on by anybody. But
Yeah,
at this point, I mean, there was nobody else for Hogan to beat, and so you had somebody who was at this point, Warrior was the only one who was viable to beat him because everyone else had already been beaten a million times, and just and so Warrior was the only one viable to really beat him at that point, and so you needed to do that because if Hogan had beaten Warrior, then there was literally nobody, and but just Warrior's act just didn't play as well in this particular spot.
yeah. Got no fucking Warrior, no selling every clothesline under the sun. Took a damn drop kick.
Well, that's a whole other part of his act, though. I mean, because a lot of his deal was like Hogan sold like crazy until it was time to Hulk up at the end,
Yeah,
and part of a big part of Warrior's whole thing was basically no selling or barely selling anything, and when you're in the main event, you got to do that whole you got to do the have the whole dramatic, you know, back and forth and everything.
yeah. Well, Haku's working here, but
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
there's Bobby going nuts here to the ref. Bobby was fantastic at this whole man. Again, made you believe. Everything's about believability back then. So yeah, hold on, long pause there. So I got a text. So yeah, like I said, the only guys I would have considered for title, let's say Warrior was not in the picture. You have Jake, who returned from his injury.
Um,
Even though we know now that he was fine not being a champion, that's the option on the table. I agree with you. The heel would probably been the best spot to do it, but that's assuming that Vince decides to change his business model in general. But you got Jake as an option there. Obviously, Savage again as a heel. Um, here's a wild card, but it will take obviously Vince, dropping his pride here. What about Dusty? Because he was fucking over at this point.
Dusty was. I mean, at this point, he was very far past his prime at this point.
Right, but he was still over it. I mean, he could still be a transitional champion.
I guess. I mean, but even but
That's what. Mhm.
Dusty even when Dusty won the NWA World Title, he didn't keep it very long.
Right, but that's how you get, the thing is, to your point, I mentioned Savage. That's how you get the Savage though. You get Dusty the title, and then Savage went beats him for the title.
But I think you're in a similar place though. With as long as Hogan is there,
Yeah,
he's a bigger deal than in
but there's
1990.
but there's no way Hogan is losing to Dusty Rhodes in a match. To your point,
Yeah. So I think because remember with Hogan, I mean, it had to be somebody who physically kind of met the visual comparison.
Warrior
Dusty
does.
did not, right? Dusty did not meet kind of the visual comparison with Hogan. That wouldn't have worked.
Hmm.
But I mean, Warrior was like Warrior did up, right? I mean,
Yeah, I love these vignettes with Martel.
now,
Back then, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Now I'm like, yeah, give me all
now,
this. I'm good with that.
um, Rick Martel actually wouldn't have been, um,
The bottom line is that it would have to have been a heel character to do it.
yeah, but wasn't yeah, and then right, and just they didn't, in at least in the WWF, heel champions just did not like they were not the model for the WWF.
Hmm. There's a highlight from WrestleMania 6 where Bossman and Akeem face each other, and then DiBiase attacks Bossman. A little thunder outside. Interesting. So at this point, Bossman now is a babyface.
Yes.
Also, he also lost a lot of weight. And there's Akeem laughing his ass off outside with Slick. This is also one of Akeem's last appearances as well too. I think he left the company around this time, a little after this.
Yeah, because I think he would be back in WCW like in '91, early '91, I think.
Yeah, he was tired. He was tired of traveling too. Also, I think on top of that, I don't blame him. The guy his size, going traveling all the time it gets annoying. I get it. There's my guy Slick. Got his T-shirt last week. I showed you. I showed you in the
Oh
text.
yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a surprise. My surprise is 6'11". My surprise is 330 pounds. My surprise is Zeus. Akeem. Shawn was like, what the fuck did I just talk to? That's my boys. You had to be there. That's all. Like all the kids, you had to be there. It's like people ask, "What's your fascination with Akeem and Slick?" I go, "You had to be there.
Yeah, and again,
You had to be there."
yeah, and again, this was so absurd at the time that yeah, I'm sorry, I just couldn't be mad about it. I mean, I
No,
couldn't get mad about it, and again, and maybe we should have been, you
look at
know.
this. Look at this. Look at Slick. Look at Slick.
It's great.
He's having fun, bro. Like this is what your boy DJ says all the time. This is sports entertainment. I'm sports entertained. Now that Confederate flag on the Big Boss Man.
Yeah.
I
Um,
mean, it is what it is. I don't get mad
it's
about it.
weird because honestly, okay, this was 1990. Because there was this weird period where it was not ripped the way that it should have been. 'Cause remember,
Right.
like Dukes of Hazard, and let me tell you, there was no outrage about the General Lee
Yeah.
and Dukes of
At all.
Hazard. Like nobody was mad about it, right? Um, and so there, I mean, there was a period where stuff like that, you know, we, I mean, should people have been more angry about it? Yes, but they just weren't, right? And I guess I don't know. I guess maybe there were other things we were focused on at the time, and we just didn't really care. Now I can remember, I mean, the Freebirds had, they had ring robes that had the stars and bars on them, and I mean, and that was part of the Freebirds' whole. gimmick in the early '80s. Like they wore, I mean, they had the Confederate robes, and they had a match against the Road Warriors, and they had their face painted Confederate stars and bars because the Road Warriors had face paint. But that was during the '80s, and there was kind of a stretch where like you know people didn't
Wow.
care. You
Like
know,
he's manhandling him too. I never see Akeem manhandling like this before ever by anybody.
yeah. So I think at this point he's on his way out at this point because
Yeah.
he wouldn't just be getting beat up on like this.
We discussed world champion possibilities if Warrior was doing it. How about Boss Man?
You know what? I mean, yeah. I mean, if he had stayed a heel, I mean, because I mean, he could definitely do the ring work. Um, so yeah, I think, I mean, if he had stayed a heel and he, and kept, doing the handcuffing people and beating them down after the match and all that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think that's another one where they just, he
Because
just
like
had
holding
to,
him down.
yeah.
Yeah. We should do that one day. One day we should pick a year and his fantasy book that year. Fantasy book the champions. Fantasy book the top guys. What we have done differently that wasn't done that year. I'll tell you right now, at 89, I would keep Savage the Bell on Savage for another couple months. But I'm also going to be using today's booking standards, not the old days of Vince's archaic way of booking, where like the good guy have to always win the title every night. No, no, no.
Well, it's just that model didn't really change because I mean that goes all the way back to his dad.
No, of course, but I'm
And
saying
then
I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use it just for fun. I use the today's model.
I mean, because yeah, I mean by um, I'd say by today's model, then I mean there are a lot of guys who would have been world. There's a lot of guys from this era who would have been world champion, or at least gotten a short run as world champion had
There's
they
no
been
doubt.
around.
There's no doubt Jake gets us a sniff. No doubt, he gets a sniff.
Yeah, I mean he would have got. I mean, and if this was like the brand split era, if they'd had a brand split back then and two, you know, quote unquote, you know, main champions, then look, Jake and Rick Rude probably would have made him into the pay per view for the other
Absolutely.
title, you know. And look, I mean, then look, DiBiase would have if they'd had two world titles back then like they do now, Jake and Rude would have gotten one. DiBiase would have had one. Mr. Perfect would have had one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are a lot of there are a lot more guys who
Savage will have more than two, guaranteed.
yeah, and he would have more than two. Andre probably would have had a proper title reign and not not that 30 seconds. Um,
I surrender the championship.
yeah, yeah. Andre would have had a proper title reign.
Absolutely, without question. DiBiase would got a sniff.
Yeah, and Orndorff probably would have got. Well, no, because I mean he was feuding with Hogan, and that just kind of was what it was. And
Yeah. All right, but by the way, DiBiase would be another guy you could have reheated in 1990. You could
yeah,
reheat him in 1990.
yeah, because I mean he after the feud with Jake, I mean yeah, absolutely.
He had constant heat. I mean, obviously, I won't go so far as to say the boom was off the rose at this point, but because it had been 3 years since his debut, we had gotten used to DiBiase being who he was.
Yeah, and now that man, they're beating the crap out of him. Wow,
Oh my god, yeah.
like, I don't even remember this.
I remember the WrestleMania 6 part. The WrestleMania 6, oh, there's a key, there's a key. Yeah. DiBiase got heat. I mean, anything DiBiase, this is why I love DiBiase. Anything he did, he got great heat. Every single feud he did, massive heat. Savage, Hogan, Bossman, Brutus, Jake. It was always one of the best feuds of the year.
Because I mean I think they always went to the point of him trying to buy this and buy that, and it was he was just the perfect villain for that time.
Absolutely.
Because because at this point, kind of the foreign heel thing had kind of faded out at this
Yeah,
point.
the bad Russian thing and
Yeah,
the
because I mean,
yeah
early to mid '80s, it was again foreign heel was the way to go.
yeah.
But by this point, that had kind of faded out.
This is Rick Martel going away now with some chick, whoever
Yeah.
she is. Kind of curious what she is. It's like Glenn Close actually from back here a little bit. Yeah, I guess not though. No. All right, getting to the end of the telecast here. Um, Not a bad show though. I mean, I
Oh
guess
no.
it's not terrible. I mean, a lot of. I mean, obviously, to me, the biggest takeaway is Earthquake. It's Earthquake. Earthquake is a big thing for me. It's pushing the Earthquake. Um, there's Bobby talking about like he's seen some flaws in Warriors game. Long term storytelling. They're ready pushing Rick Rude now.
Okay.
Bobby's doing an interview right now with Sean Mooney. He's talking about Rick
Yeah.
Rude's the only man that beaten Warrior, and so they're already pushing the Rude thing already. So Vince already probably saw the signs early,
There's the Warrior.
and it might have been more of an internal thing, not a numbers thing. It might have been an internal thing because it's too soon to look at the numbers to blame the numbers.
Yeah, it's just, but like I said, Rude was a familiar opponent. They'd had good chemistry in the ring. They'd already worked, um, and so yeah, you just kind of needed to. He needed to have a. He needed his first opponent needed to be somebody he could have good matches with, the Warrior, and he and Rude worked well together. So to that end, it made sense. Um, but again, if you weren't smart to the business, then it just looked like I mean, just looked like a rehash, really.
Yep.
And what else do we?
You can get in a come one time Rude. That gets you through the summer, and then after that we'll see. I think Savage again. He had a couple guys on the guys to work with that could have gotten him really where he needed to be. It was all about him
Yeah, it's because after Rude, what like
with Savage,
yeah, and then okay,
and
so
they
yeah,
lost and lost the title because of Savage.
yeah, and so I think they just so I don't know when exactly they decided to give up, because when did he didn't start feuding with Savage immediately, did he?
No, Savage wanted the title match, and he wouldn't give it. He wouldn't grant him a title shot.
Okay, because I remember actually I remember going to a house show. There were a few months where he teamed up with the Legion of Doom and just like they did
Oh
like
yeah, that was during that fall that fall / winter the Survivor Series, for example.
yeah, and so then that's kind of the other problem. Like he had a few months where he wasn't feuding with anybody. He was the world champion.
Hmm.
And that doesn't help either. I mean,
No, no.
it really doesn't. And so yeah, I mean, so I think some of it was just him not being the guy to have out there as the main guy,
Hmm.
and then some of it was I think that and some of it was booking. Like again, as much sense as the Rude thing made. Again, to somebody who wasn't smart to the business, it just looked like a rehash of the
By the way,
year before.
another guy that could have won a title is Rude.
Eh, Um, so just interesting time here. But I
Yeah.
thought this was actually a good show. I thought.
It's pretty good. Pretty good. Any final thoughts?
Um, just this was an interesting time. They were trying to do they were trying to do some different things, but the most important thing it just didn't take, and that was Warriors world champion. So,
It's funny because I mentioned earlier, but this is pretty much mimicking '88 in a sense. The difference is there was way more confidence in Savage to get the job done as opposed to Warrior. Like you knew Savage internally was good with the boys in the back. He gave great matches. He was a great champion. So you knew Savage can hold the fort
Yeah.
down while Hogan was gone. Hogan went away again. Same thing. Hogan went away again for a couple months. But I thought there was probably some trepidation about Warrior even before winning the title because all the stories you hear about Warrior in hindsight, obviously, that's come to pass and whatnot. There were probably fears even before that, but because, as you said, they had to do this because Warrior was the guy. Warrior was the next guy. Warrior was way too over to ignore. You know what I'm saying? You can't just put a title on anybody. It had to make sense.
Yeah.
So
And
you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk on this, obviously. And I mean, I won't say it failed. It was a disappointment, but I don't think it failed. I think failed is a strong word. I just think they definitely didn't get the desired results back for a myriad of reasons. To be honest with you, but this year mimicked '88 in a sense. You know, life without Hogan again for a little while.
yeah, and I think the difference is that the expectations were at such a level that calling it a failure. It was a failure compared to expectations based on the past couple of years. Like
Yes, I agree with that.
and that's the problem because remember '88, like they completely expanded. Like they were doing sometimes 3 house show tours, separate house show tours in '88
A
and
B A
'89,
B team, C team. Yep.
and so that's what they were. That was a level of expectation was that they could sustain like 3 house show tours, and and so to that end, Warrior being champ was not able to do that. And so to that end, it was maybe not a failure, but it was definitely a letdown. And so,
And to boot, when you compare Savage to the title versus Ward to the title, whereas Savage came as a surprise still when he won it at 4. Like you said yourself, like you had no idea that Savage would win that title for
yeah,
at the time. Um, in '90, we kind of had an idea that the possibility of Warrior winning the title was very realistic.
yeah, I'd say
So
go.
you
Well,
so you
it
already
was 50
knew
50. It was go
right
50-50 going in that match.
the grooming of both of guys are different. Whereas Savage maybe, but because of the way it was booked and the tournaments and all this stuff, you couldn't really pigeonhole Savage to being world champion come out of WrestleMania 4. Whereas the Warrior, he was being groomed already for you can see the grooming from a year, even as much as 2 years out, honestly, would be real. So that's why the letdowns more pronounced on the Warrior end because we kind of saw a future and a possible inflection point, and we're now added 2 more years to the Hulkamania era. There is wear and tear. Okay, '88 it wasn't much wear and tear, or
Right.
any at all for that matter.
Yeah.
So that's why it was a letdown.
Yeah. And just, again, just comparing them side by side as sports entertainers and as people
Yep.
you would build your company around. Now, maybe now, if Hogan if he had stayed gone the rest of the year, maybe it turns out differently because you don't have the comparison right there in your face every
Yeah.
week. So maybe if he just stayed away,
You mean beyond SummerSlam?
yeah, if he had just if yeah, I mean if he had let's say if he hadn't come back to maybe the Royal Rumble, right? And then they set up a rematch, for the following year, which I think originally was supposed to be a rematch, wasn't it? I think.
Vince, Vince
Yeah.
always said he didn't want that to happen,
So
which made no sense, obviously.
yeah. Well, I guess because then he was so averse doing the babyface versus babyface, and in a big spot like that.
But
But
do 2 years in a row be overkill, I guess. To your point.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard doing the same main event 2 years in a row. It's only happened a few times. One of them was just Roman and Cody this time, and then I mean, the only other time I can think of was that in the NWA that Starcade they did Dusty and Ric Flair 2 years in a row. For the main
Te-
event.
Technically, Hogan and Andre. Technically,
Well, no, it wasn't the main event
three,
though.
three, three and 4. Right, right,
Wait,
right, 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 right. But it was still it was still the feature match going to the tournament though.
yeah, you're right. You're right.
So
So it's yeah, it's hard doing the same match 2 years in a row. It's hard. It's just something.
although Cody Roman made sense though because it's a bigger story involved in that.
Yeah. So I think if Hogan, yeah, again, if Hogan had just stayed, maybe if Hogan had stayed away longer, and then we had to accept Warrior,
Maybe it
and what,
sticks.
maybe it does better at least.
Maybe it does
But
worse.
well, yeah, it could do worse. Yeah, I mean, because I mean, you could also argue that to what end the business was being held up on their side was being held up by still having Hogan around.
That's
So,
very true.
um,
There
yes,
was
I
still,
just think
there was still Hogan juice there. I mean, Hogan was there wear and tear Hogan? Yes. Was there still Hogan juice? Absolutely.
well, I think part of, and then yeah, definitely. It's just, I think, I mean, the wear and tear was because he had beaten everybody though,
Hmm.
and so there wasn't anyone looming on the horizon to actually put him in any jeopardy, which is why they had to do the Warrior thing. Because if God forbid he had beaten Warrior at WrestleMania 6, then it would have, I think, things would have died really fast.
It was booked the right way. They had
Yes.
to look in hindsight. It was the right thing. I think it did more for Hogan's legacy than anything because the immortal Hulk Hogan was born out of that. So
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing though, right? Because like he never went through he didn't go through any kind of agony of defeat stage or anything.
no, he went away
He
from
came
it.
out of that and they started calling him the immortal Hulk Hogan.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah, with you.
but in hindsight,
Anyway,
it was, they weren't wrong in hindsight.
no, we're not wrong at all. So, Rob, plug away. That's a good one.
Okay, as always, you can hear me every week on the Mindless Wrestling podcast with DJ and Jason, and you can hear me on my own show, the Robert Genius podcast.
All right. Of course, me on Twitter or on X at EJ7 or to podcast. The wrestling retrospective, of course. We try to do as much as we can. We got a lot more the bank to cover. We'll do more of these main events in 1990 as well as a couple other anniversary events where we do watch along. I know Rob has a couple ones he wants to do as well too. WCW matches you want to do in the future, which I want to get to as well. But of course, I'm on Twitter at or X at EJ7. Wrestling podcast across all podcast catchers, especially on YouTube at Earnestly Pod on YouTube, Earnestly Pod on Instagram and on TikTok. Until the next episode, we will talk to you guys soon.